4 years of Donald Trump's America First policy left many countries feeling a leadership vacuum in global governance, from areas like health and environment to human rights. Trump's handling of ties with allied countries also drew serious questions about his commitment to maintaining key agreements in trade and security. So when the US's new president, Joe Biden, said he would strengthen America's alliances around the world, especially in the Indo-Pacific, there was a renewed sense of hope for global cooperation and perhaps a return to stability in diplomacy with the world's biggest power. South Korean President Moon Jae-in also voiced his support for the Biden administration, saying that he stands with the new US leader in his endeavors and expressed his hope for a return to dialogue with North Korea on peace and denuclearization. For what we can expect from the bilateral relationship between Seoul and Washington over the next 4 years, we turn to none other than Ambassador Oh Jun, who has devoted his whole career to global diplomacy and standing up for human rights. He was South Korea's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations from 2013 to 2016, also chairing the Economic and Social Council from 2015 to 2016. He is now a professor at Kyung University and the chair of Save the Children Korea. Thank you again, Ambassador, for joining us on this occasion again on the show here on Global Insights. Lovely to see you this morning.
Great to be here again. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And well, we had this massive transition in global politics with the new Biden administration coming into office last month. And well, over the last 4 years, Seoul and Washington's ties were largely tested during Trump's time as he challenged the terms of our bilateral FTA, defense cost-sharing agreement, and there was really a general lack of chemistry between him and South Korean President Moon Jae-in. During your years as permanent representative to the United Nations in New York, Joe Biden was, of course, vice president during the Obama administration. And based on your knowledge of him and his trusted circle of officials, would you be optimistic about South Korea's ties with the US soon improving under the new administration?
Well, in general, yes. To be sure, President Trump was doing more harm than good when it came to the United States relations with its allies. Excessive pressure on defense cost sharing being a typical overshooting. The Biden administration will certainly fix that kind of anomaly, and the allies will be able to go back to kind of normal relations and more conventional diplomacy. But as far as South Korea is concerned, one very important factor in its relations with the United States is how to deal with North Korea. President Trump, not least because he became the first US president to meet the North Korean leader, he kind of personalized North Korea policy too much, sometimes even to the point of distorting the US priorities on denuclearization and human rights in North Korea. Ironically, such a stance towards North Korea was kind of in line with the current South Korean government's effort for rapprochement with North Korea. So when Washington goes back to conventional priority on nuclear and human rights issues in dealing with North Korea, there could be subtle difference between Washington and Seoul.
So certain differences may occur, but pretty much a return to conventions that we can expect compared to Trump's presidency. Well, of course, when Donald Trump took office in 2017, his America First policy, it really undermined the strength of international institutions, including those of the United Nations. And how did America's retreat from these shared norms and values affect morale when it came to pursuing global goals like fighting climate change, human rights abuses, and pursuing the sustainable development goals? And also, what do you hope to see from Biden's UN ambassador, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, who served as Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs during the Obama administration?
Well, President Trump's unilateral foreign policies did not just affect morale in the international community, he actually damaged global cooperation, for example, by withdrawing the US from the Paris Agreement on climate change and threatening to discontinue support for WHO and the UN as a whole. President Biden, when he was vice president, showed strong support for multilateralism, especially when he represented the United States in the UN meetings, when I was there actually, several times on behalf of President Obama. I'm sure his choice for the UN ambassador, Thomas Greenfield, will be able to effectively bring the US back at the forefront of multilateralism in addressing global challenges.
And so, speaking of multilateralism, while Biden has recommitted the US to multilateralism, his administration is still expected to be quite tough on China. And how do you think countries like South Korea, Australia, and those in the EU who are really squeezed in between, how do you think they'll continue to face pressure from Washington and Beijing to side with them in the economic and political competition going on between the two countries?
Well, I wouldn't exactly call these countries being squeezed between them, but it might not be easy for the United States and China to break out of the zero-sum equation, as you mentioned, as their rivalry seems to be inevitable in every aspect of international relations in the coming years. But I think the rest of the world, including us, including South Korea, don't necessarily have to be part of this zero-sum game. For example, as far as we are concerned, South Korea is concerned, we should be able to live both with the United States and China. I think we could say clearly to both of them that the United States is our military ally and China is our largest economic partner, so that China shouldn't doubt our security partnership with the United States, and the US should respect our economic interest with China. And they should understand, both of them should understand that that's not going to change for quite a while.
And now, while it's clear that Joe Biden has countless domestic issues to prioritise over foreign policy, of course, North Korea doesn't like to be forgotten, and each and every provocation is designed to deliver some kind of message from the regime. And of course, the North launched countless provocations during your time at the UN, including dozens of missiles, 2 nuclear tests, and even a submarine-launched ballistic missile. And I really can't imagine how many dinners and appointments you had to cancel every time these occurred. But, well, just before Biden took office in January, the regime held a massive military parade earlier and claimed to have the world's deadliest weapon in form of a new SLBM. What message do you think the North here was trying to convey? And do you think they're possibly warming up for a bigger and even more attention-grabbing provocation?
But I still remember when North Korea was engaged in provocations like missile launch or nuclear test, they kind of probably intentionally chose some special dates like July 4th. So there was surprises in the beginning, but later we were able to kind of expect that kind of surprises. But anyway, they are to be sure they are trying to draw attention. But what is actually more dangerous is that North Korea might now try to start its talk with the Biden administration as a nuclear weapon state, instead of non-nuclear weapon state. A few days ago, a former diplomat who defected North Korea last year said to the media that Kim Jong-un would not give up his nuclear arsenal but negotiate an arms reduction for relief from the international sanctions. If that is the case, then I think North Korea might launch some kind of provocation before talking to the new U.S. administration in an attempt, to have the kind of upper hand in negotiations, which could lead to another crisis. But with or without a crisis, they will have to, North Korea and United States, they will have to eventually sit down and resume negotiations for denuclearization. When that happens, as President Biden will be more principled than Trump was, North Korea will have to face a moment of truth between choosing economic development and keeping nuclear weapons.
And you've worked closely with some of Biden's recently appointed foreign policy and diplomacy handlers who also worked under the Obama administration, including Samantha Power, who you worked with at the UN, of course. And while Obama's strategic patience strategy, it was criticised for being a bit too passive. How do you think Biden's officials are going to approach the denuclearization or even disarmament issue and interact with the North Koreans?
Sometimes we forget how a United States vice president is actually part of the president's team, having his or her office next to the president's in the White House. Therefore, it is not surprising that President Biden's choices for foreign policymakers are from those who were active in President Obama's administration. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the policy of strategic patience will automatically come back. If we look back, President Obama wanted to engage North Korea in the beginning, but North Korea's provocations in the early days of the Obama presidency left him with not too many options, but confrontation or patience. So he chose patience. Likewise, it is quite likely that Biden will also try engagement first. But if North Korea does what it did to Obama years ago, there is a chance that Biden will also have to stop engaging Pyongyang and have to choose between confrontation and pressure.
And denuclearization talks traditionally proceeded in the form of six-party talks, and the South Korea and the US generally stood united in their stance. However, the talks between Trump and Kim in 2018 exclusively involved the US and North Korea, and even President Moon Jae-in had to leave the room when the three leaders randomly met up at the inter-Korean border. Do you think the Biden administration will take a more multilateral approach to resolving the North Korean issue? And what would be your advice on going forward on negotiating the terms of denuclearization, which became the deal breaker in Hanoi?
At the early stage of the North Korean nuclear crisis, negotiations were actually conducted between the US and North Korea, if we remember. And even during the six-party talks, the US had the bilateral talks with North Korea. So what was unusual about the Trump-Kim meetings was not its formality of bilateral talks, but the fact that they tried to make a deal at the summit level without working level negotiations. And that might be why the Hanoi summit broke down. The summit level talks might produce a general agreement like they did in Singapore, but an issue like denuclearization cannot be resolved without a detailed agreement. The new Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, said during his confirmation hearing that the new administration will launch a full review of the approach to North Korea with the aim of increasing pressure on the country to return to talks over its nuclear weapons program, and that they would also look at providing humanitarian assistance to North Korea. My guess is that the US will go back to a more traditional stick and carrot approach. whether they will go back to a multilateral approach will depend on how North Korea and China will respond.
Well, Ambassador, I'm afraid we ran out of time, so I'm afraid we'll have to end the interview here. But that was Oh Jun, professor at Kyunghee University, who served as South Korea's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations. Again, thank you so much, sir, for your time.
Thank you very much to you.
And to our viewers, as always, thank you for watching.